listening to STAGR Cast, brought to you by STAGR Gear. All right, we're rolling with another episode of STAGR Cast. We're back in New Hampshire once again. It seems like that's the common theme lately.
I guess so.
But we're sitting with a guest that's been requested by some people, John Moulton. I know you were on Pat Guyette's podcast not too long ago, right?
Yep.
And then from there, people kind of caught wind of you and been following you along pretty good.
Yeah.
Kind of known as the shed hunter, it seems like, in the Northeast right now.
At least one of them, I guess.
Yeah, you've got a heck of a collection. I mean, look at the table we got going on here.
You
this
got
is crazy.
Some serious antlers going on.
How did you get into shed hunting to start?
I think I found the first one, I think I was 12 during deer season with my dad. And it was like a 3-point shed. I still got it downstairs. And after that, it just became an obsession. And, you know, one thing led to another. And I don't know. I guess when I was about 18 and 19, I started to get serious about it. Mm-hmm. And when I really started clicking and started finding them, then it just became a snowball effect. Mm-hmm. And I guess it's been about 35 years now of collecting them, you know. So it's something I like to do. Hunting's great, but shed hunting, it's just that off time of year. Mm-hmm. And you learn so much. There's just a lot you can pick up and learn out there. And it can make you a better hunter. It can make you a better woodsman on a lot of things, on all game. And it's just, it's actually taken off a lot. It wasn't that popular back in the day when I did it.
Right, yeah.
The fella that found these back in the day, he really lit the fire, Stanley Batchelor. And when I met him, he was fairly old man then, but he had hundreds and hundreds of sheds.
He'd been doing it?
Yeah, he'd been doing it back in the 50s and the 60s.
Okay. Yeah, nobody was doing it back then.
No.
Wow, that's crazy.
And so I was already into it, and I was having good success, but he would tell me things, and I'd pick up. And, you know, the later years, he couldn't go much anymore. But I would go shed hunting, then I'd go up to his house and show him what I'd found, and we'd talk about it and stuff. And he enjoyed that in his older years, so it really meant a lot. And he was a great guy. He was a hunter and a trapper and a shed hunter. You know, that's a real outdoorsman, you know, as far as I'm concerned.
Well-rounded.
Well-rounded.
Yep. That was your biggest mentor when it came to shed hunting?
Yeah, for shed hunting, definitely. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. When did you start deer hunting? Was it right around that same time?
Yeah, I remember going with my dad before I could carry a gun for years.
Yeah.
And then he started letting me carry a gun, I think, when I was 12 or 13.
Yeah.
And got my first buck at 15. 205-pounder 8-pointer with a 20-inch spread.
Wow. Would have ruined most people.
It did, and I heard it. You're never going to shoot another buck like that.
Well, that might have been fuel right there, huh?
Yeah, but it was luck, you know. Mm-hmm. Dad set me there and said, don't move, and my brother-in-law just sat just a little ways from me, and I was about froze to death, and it was late in the season. It was after Thanksgiving. And a 6-pointer and a doe come running up through, and I shot at the 6-pointer and didn't get him, and I was really bummed out. And a few minutes later, that big buck come loping up through, and the rest was history. The old 30-30 and one shot, and it was done.
Open sights, was it?
Awesome. Yep, open sights. Yeah.
Seems a lot of guys started with that 30-30 back in the day.
Yeah, I still got it. It's in the safe in there, but I don't use it much anymore.
No.
Huh. So we kind of jumped ahead of what we usually do. We like to start it off with some shameless stats as a new thing we're doing. Just kind of give people a little bit of background on some of the deer you've taken. Yeah. So how many 200-pounders? I know you said your first one was 200 pounds. How many 200-pounders over the years have you pulled?
Well, I've got 7 in New Hampshire and 1 in Maine.
That's pretty good.
So 8.
Yep.
3 of those were way over 200, some good ones. And then the rest were in that 200 to 210 range, you know, and that seems to be pretty common around here anyways, you know.
That's a big one.
Yeah. You know, years ago they used to get a lot bigger bucks up north, like way up north.
Yep.
You heard of the 240 and 50 pounders, but you don't usually see that a lot around here. But yeah, eight over 200. I've got some in Canada and stuff, but it's like those don't count. You know,
I agree with you.
It's just different.
Yeah, different deer.
You know,
different genetic strain.
You know, I've hunted some of the Midwest stuff a little bit and stuff, and it's just Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont. This is where you know
the real deal.
The real deal.
Yeah, the real deal. How many sheds do you think you found? I know we were just talking about it earlier. You said you just.
Yep, I think between deer and moose, I think I'm over 1,200 sheds.
That's
now.
pretty incredible.
48 so far this year. I think last year was like 71 or 72.
That's
pretty good.
Are you still excited when you pick them up?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's incredible. I mean,
well, when I
1,200 sheds.
I picked up this guy, Tracker, my lab there was with me, and
Yep.
I was yelling.
Yeah.
I'm like, I
That's
couldn't believe
awesome.
it.
Yeah, I would have been too. That's a serious buck right there.
Yeah, that's. Would you say that one scored right there?
Well, if we give him an 18-inch credit, he comes out at 156.
He's a giant. Yeah.
Yeah,
Beautiful buck.
That little bit bigger side is right at 70 inches.
Wow. So, wow.
Unbelievable buck.
And I have a set of him over there mounted on the wall from 4 years previous. So this is an old buck. It's definitely a 9 or 10-year-old buck.
And he's still out there pounding some ground. He's still
He
alive.
is.
Yep.
He
So
is.
that's your big target right there. You would.
Yeah, it's hard to put a target on a single deer.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I'd like to say that.
They wander, don't they?
Yeah, and he's been a ghost.
Doesn't lay much sign down, you said.
No, I admit it though. I'm a shooter. You know, a decent buck comes along. I'm not the guy to hold out for that.
No, I mean you could hold out a long time for one of those. You know, there's a certain amount of luck that's involved.
Absolutely.
In crossing paths with a buck like that. You know, especially if you're just going to look for a big track and following it.
Yeah.
I mean, chances are that thing probably doesn't even have a huge track. You know.
Yeah.
You know what I mean though, like. Big rack like that, it seems like a lot of times they don't even weigh up like...
Yeah, lots of times.
Yeah.
Lots of times those 170, 80-pound deer
exactly. Are the big ones.
The big rack bucks, you know. Then there's the exceptions to the rule.
Of course, yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Yeah, I was after one the last few years in Vermont. He's dead now, like I was telling you earlier. And he had the tiniest little track you've ever seen.
Oh, really? He had a tiny little foot?
Tiny little foot.
Okay.
And... you know, like I'm talking, you'd think it was a spike horn or a button buck, like a tiny little deformed hoof, and I think that's probably why.
Wow.
You know, and he didn't lay any sign down either.
Yeah.
Very little. Didn't rub big trees. Didn't tear stuff up. But you know, I think
I think in where I found those is there was other bucks too. You know, and so it's pretty easy to just get on a track.
A buck track. Yeah.
The chances of finding just his track
is luck.
Definitely luck.
Yep.
Definitely.
Would you say that set of antlers right there? I mean, you found thousands of pairs of antlers probably, but what's your favorite set? Is that going to be up in there? That one right there? I know it's a hard question. But.
It's a hard question. It's right up there because I got 2 sets from him.
You said there was 4 years between those sets, right?
Yep, 4 years between those sets.
And he's still holding the horns like that.
Yep.
That's impressive. It's an old buck.
He's definitely in my top 3 or 4. Let's put it that way.
Yep.
I like that set right there.
Yeah.
That's probably my favorite you showed me.
That one is crazy. The mass on that thing.
Yeah.
You said how many inches of circumference? Or did you not say?
Yeah, I'm not sure what we scored. We scored him as a low 140s buck.
Yeah.
But that doesn't do it justice.
No. For the people not watching, it looks like this buck has baseball bats for main beams curled around like he's just...
Crossbred with a moose.
Something
just
like...
Crazy.
Only got one brow tine, which I love stuff like that.
Yeah.
You know,
how many years ago was that?
Funky
you
old
said this
buck.
is a while
that
ago,
was
right?
from a long time
ago.
Yeah.
And you ever seen anything like that since over the years? Some similar stuff?
Yeah, a few close, but that's probably the best.
Yeah.
Lots of times you'll see a buck with a lot of mass, but not much for tines on that downhill side sometimes. There's a bunch in the piles over there like that. And that takes age.
Yeah, I was about to say, it takes age to get that mass. You don't get that for a while.
Those aren't 3 and 4 year old bucks.
No, they're old bucks.
I would just love to know what this buck was back in the day.
It had to have been ancient, huh?
Had to been. I mean, all those sheds right there are all huge like that, and had to been a 10-year-old deer, anyways.
I mean, I'd call these sheds world class
For
the pedestals.
The bases on those things.
Like what? That's like next level, you know. His pedestals have to be like 12 inches around or something, like crazy.
It's crazy big.
Not 12, maybe. I don't know, maybe 12.
I think you're about 9.
9, yeah, that around the pedestal, like around here.
Yeah, well,
I know that's not like a measurement you take, but just for the sake of
it's probably over 10.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like, yeah, I've never seen anything like it. Can you imagine? Like I said earlier, he had to weigh 300 pounds because for that pedestal to sit on the deer's head must have been just a whomper. I mean, maybe it was a moose.
Yeah.
Maybe he was a weird moose, just sitting back, weird, deformed little thing. No, it's a deer, but
we'll never know.
No.
Sure.
What year do you think these things are?
I think Stanley found those. I think it was in the 1970s.
Okay.
You know.
Long time.
It was a long time ago. And there's 4 antlers off that. There's 2 other
off the
singles
same deer.
over. Yeah, off the
This is his biggest deer, though.
I think there's one side that's bigger than that.
Gotcha.
Wow. I think this is the only set, but yeah, there's one side bigger, but they're all very similar. Yep.
How often do you find sets next to each other? Like, yeah.
Usually, a lot of looking. I might find 2 or 3 sets a year.
Right next to each other.
Yeah.
So it doesn't happen often.
Oh no.
Yeah.
No. That set right there, I can show you pictures. I got a video too. They were like 5 feet apart.
I saw them on Facebook.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. It was crazy.
Yep.
And 4 years before that, they were 75 yards further up the ridge.
Really?
In the same spot. They were about 20 or 30 yards apart that time.
So maybe it's just him. He likes to drop them at the same time or something.
Yeah, he likes that spot, evidently, but I don't know what the window was in between. It had to do with feed, I assume, and stuff. He just wasn't there.
Yeah, because I just found this year, I found 13 sheds and only 1 set next to each other. And that's the first time I've ever done that.
Yeah.
And yeah, it seems like they drop one and carry the next one to the next county or something. It seems like sometimes.
Yeah.
But
that set mounted over there on the wall was almost touching last year.
Wow.
The one with the double flyers on the G2s. They were literally like, he must have just shook his head. He shook his head.
Yeah. Got sick of them.
Yeah.
Enough is enough.
Yeah. But that's a really cool buck too.
Is that buck still alive too?
I think he is.
Yeah.
I think I would have known if somebody would have taken him. He's got no brows. Yeah. And he's got the...
Very unique.
Very
looks
unique.
like a mule deer looking.
Yep.
I'd call him muley.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll call him whatever.
Muley. Yeah, right? Yeah. I don't name a lot of deer. Do you name deer?
No.
Because if anybody would name deer, I think it would be you, because you know about
the amount of history you
every
have
buck, and you have all this history with them, but you're not a namer.
I'm not going to name him.
No.
Speaking of that, would you say, so of the deer that you find, the sheds you find when you're shed hunting, what percentage would you say you actually end up killing during the season? Like, not too often, or?
Not too often. All my years of doing this, I have 2 bucks that I've killed I have sheds off.
Really? That's it?
2. But I can tell you of a lot of bucks that were taken that
you have the sheds.
have gotten killed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Were they in this like same area, or a lot of times were they like miles and miles?
Both. Some were right close by. And actually, a couple of friends, I know people that have taken the deer, and I've given them the sheds.
Oh, that's cool. That's pretty cool.
And then there's other people, I've seen it like on social media and stuff, and I'm like, I know I know I got to shed off that buck, and haven't said anything.
Right.
But
No
yeah,
kidding.
it's kind of cool.
Yeah. That's something to be said, though, that you find they must travel quite a bit, because you're finding them and then you go and hunt in similar areas and you're not shooting them. So that's telling me they're moving a lot.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many factors with feed and timing.
And winters.
So if you've got really good feed, they're not going to drop as quick right away.
Oh,
and it also depends on, are the does bred? So how's your buck to doe ratio? That plays into it.
So if it's a really bad buck to doe ratio, so if there's a ton of does and only a few bucks, will they...
They'll hold them longer.
Okay.
As a rule. I mean, there are variances, but if there's no competition in a severe rut and competition between bucks, they're going to have a tendency to carry them longer.
No kidding.
That's interesing.
So that's the
Never
boat.
heard of that.
That's the boat that we're in over in Vermont.
Yeah.
They're just carrying them right now still.
I mean, you see people post pictures. I think
They're
a couple
still
weeks ago,
breeding
there was
does.
a guy had a big 10-pointer in his back lawn. I've seen it on Facebook.
In Vermont?
In Vermont. Still holding
Really?
his antlers in
Probably still breeding
It was
does.
in beginning of April. He had still had a rack.
That's crazy. Yeah. That's crazy. I've seen years, it's going back quite a ways, but where you didn't have any mass crop, no nuts, bad apple year, feed. Deer will dump their antlers before the hunting season's really over. I know a guy that killed a archery buck the last day of the season. December 15th, went up and grabbed it and
Popped him right off.
Popped him off.
Yeah, I've heard of that in my area too.
I found multiple fresh sheds on a year like that right around Christmas or before.
Yep.
I didn't find the first sheds this year. I think it was the 20th of January.
Okay. So that was a later year for you?
I think so, but it was good acorns in
so
that
they were holding.
They were holding.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that if they had good feed,
it plays into it
because they're less stressed. Is that how
Stress.
that works out? Yeah.
Stress.
So stress is the biggest factor of dropping.
Yep, just like a wounded deer. You hear of a wounded deer dropping earlier.
If you get like a 2.5 foot snowstorm in December, you're thinking they're going to drop a little earlier.
Yep, and they're definitely going to be marching towards traditional yards. See, like a winter like this, the deer didn't have to yard. Like in Maine and way up north where they get a lot more snow, they have a tendency to go to those traditional yards. This part of the state, not necessarily. Some years they do, but if we don't have any snow in, December or January, they're not gonna go to those traditional yards.
Yeah, I kind of want to expand on that because I always had a question about it. Because like Maine, you have the traditional yards where there's like hundreds of deer go to them and stuff, and then Vermont, New Hampshire, the more mountainous areas, that don't seem like we have those yards. So those bucks will just hang. You'll see that they'll just hang up high still, or
no, they'll come down. Well, it depends. They'll come down. You're gonna find smaller pockets of them.
Okay,
but there is some traditional yards out there in the central part of the state and the northern part of the state that those deer go to. But snow is the big factor,
If it's a lot,
they
move. And, and I think they're more likely to yard if they're coming off of like a really tall mountain, like a big mountain.
Yeah.
They're more likely to come down off. Where it's like if you're in like 2,000 footers, even with deep snow, I feel like they're still likely to kind of just stay where they are. Because I know in my area in Vermont, this year I found 4 sheds. And the way I kind of went about it in Vermont is I was looking for sheds where I would be trying to hunt the deer. And I was finding them. Yeah. Where I thought they'd be right during rifle season. And that's where I used to go wrong in my area is I would always be down like in the lowlands, in the swamps. They're like kind of like, like cedar swamps and stuff. I figured they'd yard up. But I was just finding them, up on top of the 2,000 footers and stuff like that.
You're kind of finding them in the areas that you would typically hunt
where
during the season.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's,
What's your experience with that?
Yeah, I mean, it can be different. It can change. That's why I say there's the factor, the weather and the food, and some deer are kind of like homebodies, I think. They just live in a much smaller area. There's a buck that I have some history with that I know a couple other guys have sheds off. And I know that deer has been seen and got his picture taken 8 or 9 miles from where he drops.
Really?
Wow.
Well, 8 or 9 miles in this part of the state is quite a difference of range.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like in Maine and some of those places where they may go 20 miles.
So yeah, deer in Maine, they'll truck for a yard.
Yeah. So that deer, I think he just strikes out and you know, really travels. But if he knows where the food is much better, they're going to go a long ways to go to where the food's good, right? You know,
Because they got to eat.
they got to eat.
So it's a personality thing between the deer, and then just a compound of all the factors, environmental and
Yep.
everything that's going on. That's
Yep.
what dictates where they're going to end up,
Yep.
where you're finding their sheds and
Yep.
stuff.
If you find sheds in an area, do you always kind of remember that spot? Like,
Yeah.
you think, like, do you think if you find a couple sheds in a spot, it's always going to be that way? Pretty much, kind of? Roundabout way?
Well, I think of it like, okay, if I found a couple of sheds there, why were they there? Why did I find them there? Was it because of a good bedding situation, or was it the feed? And I try to replicate the years, you know. Obviously, if it's a oak ridge with hemlock and it's a year that we don't have any acorns, I'm not going to look there.
Yep.
I got a friend that I talked to. He said, "Geez, I found all these sheds last year and I didn't find any up there this year." I said, "Well, was there any acorns?" "Yeah, there's acorns all over the place." Well, they were old acorns. They weren't fresh, you know. So
Yep.
those deer aren't going to be there. So if you find them in a spot, you really got to do your homework of why were they there. You know, there's usually a reason, and if you start finding them multiple sheds over a couple of years or 3 years in a spot, yeah, that's
Pay attention to
pay
it.
attention to it. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot to learn. From shed hunting is hard.
Well,
It's an art.
it's hard.
It's an art, man. It seems like.
and just when you think you got it figured out, you don't. It's like hunting, you know.
Yeah.
You do real good, and then you're like, I've had some times where I've had some real droughts and go out 4 or 5 times in a row, and I'm not finding nothing.
Yep.
And it's like, and then bam, like the day I went out, I found 5 when I found this set.
That's crazy. Well, it's probably because they're in bachelor groups that time of year. So when you find one,
Yep.
there probably is a couple more right around there.
Yep.
Yeah. I never really thought of that.
Would you say that your shed hunting efforts in the spring and the winter and stuff dictate where you can hunt the following season, or is that a biggest factor as far as scouting goes for you?
Well, it's definitely one of the big factors because I don't run cameras, and that tells me the quality that's out there. Or if I find sheds from the same buck 2 or 3 years in a row, I know he's got some age on him. Mm-hmm. You know, and I'm not going to pass up a nice 180 or 190 pound buck, you know, with a nice 8-point rack. You know, so if I can go to a mountain or some ridges that I think there's 2 or 3 mature bucks, you know, you're going to up your odds quite a bit.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there may be a giant in one spot, but you really don't know where he lives. I'd almost rather hunt a spot that had 3 or 4 bucks.
Then
Yeah.
the one big one, yeah.
You know?
Yep.
Yeah. So you like to hunt the areas that really have the age that you find through sheds and stuff.
Yep.
That's what gets you the most excited.
Yep, definitely.
But you're not afraid, which you shouldn't be, to pull a trigger on. You know.
No.
What if it's a
No.
good hunt and a decent buck? You know.
I admit it.
it's-
I'm a shooter.
Yeah. There's nothing wrong with that. Absolutely.
You know, it's some of the big deer I've got, like those 200 pounders, 3 out of those 8 were opening day rifle.
Really.
And one of those was before that in the muzzleloader season. So there's half of them. So, and it wasn't it's because I knew those deer were there. So the big heavy deer, Some of those, if I would have got them 2 or 3 weeks, a month afterwards, they certainly wouldn't have been 200 pounders, which is fine. I'm just saying,
Right.
it was like luck of the draw.
Yeah.
Yep.
Good. A lot of those, I feel like, after the first week, they're probably not 200.
Yeah. You know what's weird about that, though, is the buck I shot in Maine this last year was November 23rd.
Yep.
And he was 202.7, but I could not believe the amount of fat on that deer.
Really?
It's loaded.
He had a lot of fat on him, and when I scun him along his rib cage, just like a layer of fat on the rib cage. And usually when they're run down, the ass ends leaned out and stuff. This deer was not. And I was talking to a couple of my buddies up there, and they think it's because there was a lot of does in that area. So maybe those bucks weren't traveling much.
Okay. Yep.
So they're the competition for does, maybe.
So he wasn't expending the
No.
energy as...
Yeah, I mean, he was fat.
Or maybe it was just his personality. Maybe he didn't really care too much for does.
Yeah.
Maybe he liked bucks.
Did you notice when you were in there hunting? Was there a lot of deer sign, a lot of does?
Yeah.
There was a lot of
Yeah.
antlers.
The day before I shot that buck in Maine, I saw a couple of does and I saw a small buck, a small basket rack, 4 or 6-pointer, I don't know, and I didn't shoot him. And then I went to another spot the next morning and nothing. I said, I got to go back to that spot where the does were. Mm-hmm. And, 2 or 3 hours into it, I bumped into him. He was coming right at me,
That's awesome.
So you had a pretty good 2021 then. You got 202 in Maine, and what did your big New Hampshire buck weigh this year?
215.
That was, so you had
That's
200
big.
pounders this year.
Yep.
215's heavy.
Yeah.
That was a big rack buck too, wasn't it?
Yeah. He's just an 8-pointer, but grossed 142 inches.
Jeez. Any sheds from that one, or he was just...
I got one shed off.
Oh, you have to show us that one.
That's yeah. Cool. But I think that shed that I have was 2 years previous. I think he was a 3.5-year-old.
Okay.
And so if that's him, I took him when he was 5.5. He blew up pretty good. An 8-pointer over 140 inches.
Can't go wrong
Can't
there.
go wrong with that. No, not in
Can't
these
ask for
mountains.
much more.
No.
I was happy. It was a good year. It was a good year for deer hunting.
Was it your best year?
I think so.
It was, yeah.
I think so. In a long time. I've never shot 200 pounders before, but I've had some good years where shot some nice bucks.
Yeah.
But 2 weeks, 10 days apart, something like that. That was a pretty good run.
That's a pretty good run.
It sounded like your Maine trip was on a whim, wasn't it? This year you weren't even planning on going to Maine, was it?
Yeah, I wasn't gonna go. My dad passed away, and then I was like, geez. And then I decided last minute to go.
Yep.
It was Thanksgiving week, so I'm kind of glad I did.
Yep.
It turned out good, but yeah, I like Maine. Done a lot of hunting up there over the years, and even in central Maine, we've got a place up there, and there's a lot of deer, but I like going north.
You like going up way up there? Yep.
Way up.
Well, yeah, just that big woods that's less deer, but you're not worrying about the posted signs. And our place in central Maine, there's oodles of deer.
Really?
There's deer in our field every night, just about.
Is it like south central more?
It's central.
Central
Maine.
Okay,
yeah.
gotcha.
Yeah. But it's smaller pieces of woods, a lot of posted property.
Yep.
And I'm a walker. I don't do a lot of stand hunting other than maybe bow hunting. But, it's just not my cup of tea. I want to go out and wander. To me, it's more, the older I get, it's more about the adventure.
Yep.
And seeing things. And it doesn't have to be a big, huge buck, but if it's in a beautiful place and it's a good hunt and, friends involved and...
That's what it's all about.
My wife thinks I'm crazy. One of my favorite things to do is drag deer.
Oh,
My buddies call, and you know what? It's hard work, but it's a blast.
It
Yes,
is.
it is.
It's the best part of it. It's awesome.
It used to be before cell phones and social media. I'm going to go back before you guys.
Okay.
Take us there.
Yeah.
my phone would be ringing during deer season. My wife would be like, "Oh, well, I know he's gone. One of his buddies got a deer," and I'm like, "Yeah, this is what I live for."
Yeah.
Now we got a phone and we got a text at least, but it was like during deer season, I'd have the phone in my ear and you're checking with all your buddies and stuff, and now we can just do like a group text.
Yeah.
So technology is actually pretty cool as far as that.
For communicating, yeah.
Yep, definitely.
Makes it handy for sure. Huh? Do you want to? Were both your deer this year? Were they bare ground or were they on stud?
Well, the buck with the muzzleloader, it was.
That was in New Hampshire? Or was that
that was New Hampshire.
Gotcha.
So that was the day before rifle open. So that would have been November 9th, I believe. And that day it was 58 degrees. And the buck in Maine, there was a little bit of snow, but it was crunchy. And then you got in the softwood, and there would be like nothing.
Yeah.
It wasn't tracking snow.
So you're just creeping around.
I was still hunting, and I was using the wind. I was to my advantage, and I made a big loop around a clear cut, and I was checking these little fingers of softwood, and I got to this opening and went to go step over this blowdown, and I looked down and I could just see a white rack in the clear cut, and he was coming right at me,
Yep.
He came a little bit, and I had him in the scope, and then he's going to turn, and there was a bunch of fir and spruce right there, 6 or 8 feet tall, and if he would have turned, went into that, so I had to pull up and shoot. It was 100 yards, and I just dropped him. I was lucky, I guess, and I couldn't believe it. It happened real quick,
Do you use a scope, or do you...
I use a Trigicon on my carbine.
Okay. You got AccuPoint?
Or
is it just a traditional one?
Just a traditional one,
Yeah.
but I've got a open sight peep one too, which I'm probably fine up close, but my eyes aren't as good as they used to be.
Yep.
So I'm questioning that. The scope's a pain in the bad weather. Let's face it. But,
there's pros and cons of both.
Pros and cons of both.
They all have their days.
But if I was tracking, I'd want the peep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Just because most of the places, most of the time, it's going to be a close shot.
Yeah, you're not going to get that long one anyway.
Not usually.
Yeah.
There's those freak things that
Yeah.
happen around a cut or some wide open hardwood, but that's not...
Doesn't happen much.
There's no substitute for the speed that you get with the peep, being able to pull up and
Quick.
crack them
It's
off.
quick, man.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was the story on your 2021 New Hampshire buck? So you give us your Maine. What was the story on the New Hampshire one?
That was... I'd been hunting this mountain. I'd seen a lot of deer. I'd actually passed up a couple of small bucks. And a buddy of mine had seen a buck that morning further down the ridge, and I went down that way, and it was hot. It was warm. It was one of those days that it's like I'd stripped down and I had a sweatshirt on. I was down to a t-shirt when I was climbing up in there. It's like 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and I'm going back up the mountain for the second time, but further down, and it's one of those things. I was checking the softwood knobs, and I came down off this shelf, and it was a wicked rub and scrape line right there, and I'm sweating, and I just said, geez, I gotta cool down. I backed up against a tree, and I wasn't there 2 minutes, and he was coming down that scrape line.
Really?
Wow.
So 2:30 in the afternoon,
Cruising.
Just that's just tells you that you just gotta hunt and be in the woods.
When it's time, it's time.
When it's time, it's time. I was looking earlier. That was November 9th. The year before that, it was November 13th. The year before that, it was November 14th in New Hampshire. So that second to third week seems to be
Pretty hot.
It seems to like when things turn on, at least my experience, If I had vacation, only had a week, I think I would take the second to the third week in November.
And you got a pretty decent chance at snow, you know?
Yeah.
But,
Definitely if you travel a little north or in the mountains and stuff. we got snow a couple of times, but it's elevation dependent too.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of those places. Mm-hmm. So
you jump them once, you can come right down out of it pretty quick. And it seems like they know where that snow line is too. I swear. Yeah. You get up in the green growth tracking one, you bump them, and you just bloop down over to another knob or something, and you lose them. But
2 years ago, I tracked one, and I was all excited, and I was gung ho, and he went right up on top, right where you're talking about. And I'm weaving through that spruce, and I had jumped him once. And you know how slow going it is in there, and I played around with him in there for maybe an hour and a half, and then he peeled right out and he dropped down into some hardwood, and I'm like, this isn't good. This isn't good. He run down and he got right out of the snow, and then you can only follow him so far after that.
Yeah, you can just, especially on if it's wet leaves, you can for a ways.
Yeah.
But
you end up burning yourself out, because I've done it too. But I think you're looking down much more than you're used to when you're tracking on snow.
Yeah.
And then you're not looking where you should be, or they catch you and they're gone. And it's tough.
It is. I always try when we get like a good rain. I'll go out into like a spot where I think there probably isn't very many deer.
Yeah.
So maybe if you get on a big buck track, you could just follow it for a ways, but it's very hard.
Very hard.
Very hard.
Yeah. Good practice.
Definitely good practice. Gets you into good areas, But.
Yeah, I tell people that aren't trackers, and I'm no great tracker. I don't claim to be. I've done quite a bit of it. I think I'm a better still hunter just because for where I live, that's what you do most of the time. But I tell people that want to track, just do it. And it doesn't matter what they track, but you can learn a lot from it. And it's not just, the size of the deer or something, but if you follow deer long enough, they're going to take you places and teach you things.
Yeah.
They're going to take you through things, and you're going to look, and it's like those high mountain saddles.
Yep.
And it's, what are they eating? What are they nipping? There's just all that information that you can, and even if it's an old track, right?
Yep.
And not much is going on, take it and gather information, because that's one of the things I'll do is, like, say we did get a good snow and I didn't have a track, I'll go to some of those spots where I know they like to cross in those saddles.
Yep.
Or, I saw scrapes in there before we had snow. Man, what a great spot to pick a track up.
Yep. You were saying something earlier about shed hunting. You said you like to follow big tracks.
Yep.
And you were just saying something about old tracks. I like to take old big tracks backwards.
Yep.
Like you were saying, like you do shed hunting. And I think you do learn a lot going backwards on a track. Especially like if it's an old track coming down off of a big mountain.
Yeah.
You go back up on it.
Yeah.
You're going to learn a lot about that deer. I haven't killed one like that yet, but I think eventually I will.
Yeah.
They'll bring you back in. I think Larry Benoit actually talked about that quite a bit.
Yeah, if you got a big track in a feed area and he's feeding, if you can find his back track, chances are he's going to take you to a bedding area,
exactly,
right?
Yeah.
And if you can get like a direction out of it or something, that's just knowledge that you can file.
It's good intel.
Intel for down the road, right?
Yeah, and I think in these areas, big bucks don't bed in the same spot every time. But they definitely have places that they favor.
Yes.
Or they'll be on a big swing where it'll take them 2 or 3 days. And then, 2 or 3 days later, they'll be in the same little patch of spruce or whatever. Mm-hmm. And that's what, going backwards, you can learn a ton.
Yeah. I've tracked enough on a couple of mountains, one in particular, over like, say, 20 years. But I've probably tracked 5 or 6 different bucks that have taken me through the same spot.
Not funny.
Over years. It's like they go in the same areas.
They do.
Not always, but they take you into those spots, and you like a light bulb goes on, you know?
It's funny you say that. I don't have the experience that you do, but in the time that I've been doing it, like about 10 years in my area, in the bigger mountains, all the big bucks take me through the same notches.
Yeah.
They like to walk the same old skid roads, way up high.
Yeah.
They like to hit the same little scrapes that look really puny, but they're actually big, huge bucks working them.
Yeah.
What is that? Way up high on the mountains, the scrapes look so puny, even the ones that they hit every year. I don't know what it is. I think it's just because there's less of them hitting it, maybe.
Deer, they don't need to make the giant ones that are the size of a car versus the
I don't ever find those like up in the big mountains, like way up high. You don't find those big giant scrapes.
I don't think I've ever seen one way up high like that.
No, they're always like these little
low.
dinky things with a branch, and probably because they're only worked like twice a year, or something like that.
I mean, a lot of those ones they're laying down, they're not coming back to all the time, when you're tracking a buck, they'll be laying scrapes down left and right sometimes, and they ain't never coming
just
back
the
to
walking
those ones.
the walking ones,
But they definitely do have the community ones and the ones that they prefer for sure.
Yeah.
Huh. Right.
Yeah, those flat shelves, they're down. You come down the steep stuff and then it levels out.
Yep.
There's usually sign on those.
Oh yeah.
Every one of them, just about.
Yep.
Yep.
And it's like if you file all that stuff and you hunt those spots, man, you've just upped your odds so much, right?
Yeah.
It's like that those areas that you never see any sign. Well, you don't waste any time over there. And, there's all these things that you can just up your odds on.
Be where the deer are.
Yeah.
Speaking of filing stuff, do you use like OnX or anything like that to record or remember where stuff is? Or
it's funny you say that because I just got OnX this last month.
Did you really?
I'm
That's
a newbie.
pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But I got to tell you,
That's a killer.
it's really cool.
Yeah, it is.
Because I used it yesterday, the tracker part of that, and my buddy's been using it and stuff. But I had a GPS for years and stuff, but it's kind of a pain in getting it out. But that is so easy to use that.
it's handy. It's a tool. It's a good tool.
Yeah,
And
it definitely is.
It's replaced all GPS for a lot of guys.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't carry GPS in the woods. I know a lot of guys aren't carrying GPSs in the woods anymore. But it's handy.
Jumping back into the shed conversation, have you ever boiled it down to how many miles per shed you're at, kind of?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Yes. And it varies a lot depending on what you're talking, just deer, just moose.
Just deer.
I'd have to go over there and check, but I think I'm around 8 to 10 miles per shed.
That's funny. I figured this year I was about 10 per shed.
Yeah. And there'll be 4 times in a row you go out and put on 5, 6, 7 miles and nothing. But then you have that 4 or 5 antler day.
Yep.
And,
It
evens
out.
It evens out.
That's a good statistic because a lot of people will go out shed hunting, one time and they'll get discouraged that do 5-6 miles and be like, this sucks. I
This
didn't
is
find
terrible.
anything.
Yeah.
That's a good way to put it, though.
Another thing I wanted to hit on, because this is something I just started. I found 3 sheds in my life before this year, and I'd look a lot. But what I would do is I would just get into a piece and I would just do like a big circle and like hit all the spots where it looked like there was deer.
Yeah.
And I'd look and I'd never find anything. This year what I started doing, which my buddy Connor Schlong taught me, is to start walking some stupid grids.
Yeah.
And it's pretty mindless. It gets pretty boring, but, I'm finding them now. Is that something that you do? Do you grid?
I only grid when I'm looking for a match, or when I find something, I'll start gridding more.
Find an antler.
Yeah.
So until you find an antler, you don't grid.
Nope.
That's pretty.
Because
It's pretty good.
Good, because if you really look and pick up on the cues, you can eliminate a lot of that woods without having to look through it.
Yeah, because like what I did this year, like I'd get on a big southern slope with oak, and I would just walk up a bank, go 10 feet, walk down it. Go 10 feet, walk up it, go 10 feet, walk down it. And that's how I'd find them.
Yeah.
But, maybe as I go on, maybe I'll be able to cut a lot of that. I have to do it the hard way right now.
So I've broke it down a little bit as far as feed and bedding and then trails.
Okay.
Now, this is just me, and it's a theory that I have. It can be different for everybody.
That's going to be a good theory, though.
60 to 70% of all sheds are going to be on feed.
60%.
Then you'll find, maybe maybe 10 to 20% in those bedding areas. Very rarely are they in the trails so much.
No kidding.
Interesting.
60% in the feed. That's it. It makes sense. Especially that time of year. It's priority.
Feed, then bedding, and then trails. I mean, when I used to just walk those deer paths, it's like you hardly ever picked one up right in the trail. I'm not saying you don't, because you can. It depends on how much they're traveling between feed and bedding also. But, it's mostly on the feed.
Gotcha.
It's good information.
That is good information right there. Yeah. So when you're striking off, when do you start shed hunting? Is it usually December, January?
Yeah, usually January.
January. So when you're striking off to go find a shed, you're heading to the feed first, typically?
Yeah, depending on what they were feeding on during deer season and, what I found, information with that.
Hey, a quick word, then we'll dive right back into the episode. Just wanted to give you guys a quick update on STAGR gear and let you know that everything is on schedule and everything is going as it should, so we're super excited about that. If you're following us on our social media pages or if you're subscribed to our email list, you'll be the first to know when pre-orders open. We got an awesome lineup of gear coming for you this year, so stay tuned and it'll be coming soon. All right, so we're coming back from a quick little bathroom break for your dog tracker. I know you bring those dogs shed hunting with you, don't you?
Yeah, I do.
Did they do any shed hunting themselves?
Yeah, he's pretty good with the moose antlers, smelling it, but he's never picked up on the deer antlers.
Yep. He's a good old boy. How old's he?
Yeah, he's 11 this month.
Oh, no way.
Got a golden retriever. I'm trying to teach her. She found 2 this year. So.
Oh, good.
That's good.
Yeah, she's 2 years old, so.
Yeah. He's been a lot with me this year, but the big long trips, pretty hard on him now. I got to be careful.
Yeah.
I did 17 miles yesterday, and I didn't take him. That's
a lot of steps, especially dogs zigzagging like they do.
I did 44,000 steps yesterday.
Wow. Holy crap.
Yeah.
That's a good day.
Yeah.
How many sheds you find yesterday?
Well, only one fresh one.
One fresh one.
But found some old stuff.
And that was the great big one you showed us out there, right?
Yeah.
That's a good day then. Would you say, how much do you spend more time deer shed hunting or moose shed hunting? More deer, right?
Probably more deer.
Yep.
Yeah.
How many moose sheds you pull in a year?
I don't know. Like last year I found a lot. Yeah, a lot of old stuff too, but I probably found about 40 or 45 last year. I think I'm probably around close to 20 this year.
So would you say you're 44 deer this year and 20 moose?
No, I think I've got 47 or 48 total.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Gotcha.
Yep.
It's a pretty good year.
That's
yeah. Hopefully I'll break 50.
Yeah.
Is that the goal?
I'm sure you will.
Yeah, I wanted to find over 50. Last year it was over 70, but I'm not going to do that again probably.
What was your best year, number-wise?
Last year.
Over
that was
70.
70.
Before that it was like 68.
Yep.
But it's getting harder.
Yeah.
Harder. The older you get, it's harder to put those miles on.
Yeah.
So I try to be smarter.
Yep.
Try to go to the spots where I think are really going to produce.
Yeah.
But it's time too. You got to kind of have a handle on where they are when the shedding starts.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of homework to it, but it's good exercise. It's a good thing to do.
Yep.
Like I said before, it teaches you a lot that you can put towards deer hunting.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So it's a win-win. Even when you don't find nothing, it's a win.
Getting good exercise at least.
Yep.
Yeah. So
How many miles a year are you doing for shed hunting typically?
Well, right now,
If you keep track of it.
Yeah, I do. I used to keep a log of every shed I found, where I found it, and stuff. And then I didn't do it for quite a few years. Now I just started doing it again, and I'm at 225 miles so far.
Since you started?
Since I started this year looking for sheds.
That's a good year. So you earn your supper that way for sure.
Yeah, a lot of sore legs.
I bet. For someone that wants to get into shed hunting, because I know it's a growing thing, it's getting more popular, moose and deer shed hunting. What would you suggest to somebody that wants to get into it, as far as how to look, what to look for, type of stuff, if they want to go find sheds in their primary areas?
Yeah, well, it can really vary through different parts of the state, so it's hard to say what would work right here is there because feed changes. You know, some areas have oak, some areas don't. You know, those mass crop years, you know, clue into that. And, you know, a lot of people feed the deer up north and then they congregate to those areas and stuff. But, you know, it's like the traditional yard. Sometimes, some years, the deer are already shed by the time they get to those. So I would say key in on feed.
Most important part.
Yep.
Feed. Yep. You said you're finding 60% of the 60 to 70% in that feed.
I would say so. And then the next thing being bedding areas, which is usually softwood, not far from where the feed is. So I'd say that would be the two biggest things: feed and bedding areas.
Feed and bedding. And you said you're finding a little bit on the trails. Is that in between the bedding and feed typically?
Yeah, usually.
Yeah, so
you know,
you're queuing on those two things. And
and then there's always going to be the random stuff that you can never predict. Like I found sheds before, and it's like, wow, what the hell? Yeah. Why was this even here? But, you know, just putting the miles on, you know, you'll find them sooner or later.
We don't have to get into full patterns, but would you say the highest was you ever found a deer shed at, elevation-wise?
I think I found one, I found one that a week or two ago there at like
Pull that one up.
2,800 feet.
It's a whomper. It scores about 9 inches.
And actually, I was actually surprised to find that where I did, but I'll take it.
I mean, hey.
I was going to step on it.
It's impressive that you picked that thing up. It just looks like a little stick.
Yeah,
you got the eye for it, though.
Yeah.
I remember this. This was probably 2015. I put a camera way up high on a big mountain in Vermont. It's like just under a 4,000 footer, and I put this camera up in these spruces just, you know, for scientific purposes. I wanted to see what was up there. I figured some absolute monster lived up there, you know. And the only buck I had on camera all year was a spikhorn, and it looked like he was a big deer, like a big heavy deer, and his spikes were probably like 4 or 5 inches, like on the bases, and they were like 6 inches tall, and bladed.
Yeah.
And I don't know, you know, and when I actually went to get the camera in October, because I set it in August, and I was very impatient. I wanted to go see what was on that thing, you know, I was younger, but I was finding a bunch of rubs up there, and it was weird because they were big trees, but it would be shined up on one side and then perfectly on the other side be shined up. And it made sense when I took that camera home and looked at the card, because he was sticking his spikes right through the tree and rubbing it. So I don't know if that was a genetic thing, or maybe he was like some ancient mountain monarch up there, just went back to spikes.
I heard of a guy, I think it was 8 or 10 years ago now, not far from where I live here, that shot a 215 pounder and all it had was spikes. And I heard those were like 12-inch spikes.
Yep.
Wow.
Big base at the bottom like you're talking about, and all he had was spikes.
I think it's like a genetic thing, kind of. Like it's like a really crappy horn genetic.
I mean, I've heard of them up in Maine, people shooting 200-pound spike.
Or maybe they go back.
It could be, yeah.
But
well, that's
part of it.
some of it too.
Yeah.
But you tell me this thing's probably 10 years old, it's making me think, okay, maybe they don't shrink that much.
I think it's like people. You know, it's like it just all different shapes,
sizes. Yeah, you're right.
And
some maybe had real stressful times or something.
Yeah. I've got a shed over there in my pile that's just a big fork that has a base that's probably about the same size as this guy, and all it is just a big fork.
Yeah.
And I saw that deer.
Did you really?
I saw that deer years ago, and it was Christmas Eve, and he'd crossed the road in front of me after dark, and he had one antler on. And it was Christmas the next day, and after all the kids had opened their presents and stuff, I got in the truck and I wheeled right down there. And within an hour, I found that shed.
No kidding.
Did you just get on his backtrack and follow it? How far off from where you saw him?
It was only a couple hundred yards.
Oh, so
he
you
was
just
right
dropped
there.
it before you saw him.
He was right there, and it was in some hemlock and stuff. And then I took his track the other way, but I never found the other side.
Yep.
But I saw that deer, and he was just big forks on him, and he was a big-bodied 180 to 200-pound deer. Yeah. That's all he had. It's kind of cool.
It is kind of cool. I like those interesting bucks, you know, the different antlers. Have you ever found the coveted road shed?
Yes, I have.
You have. You son of a gun.
I found match sets from the
Come
road.
on.
Really?
In a field or in the...
Yeah, years ago, I was logging this piece, and I was going up the road at daylight in the morning, and I'd seen where the deer had been eating underneath these apple trees, and I slow down and look every day, and it's getting light, and I look, and it's like, that looks like tines. So I back up and jump out of the truck and look, and there was a 8-point set, 2 or 3 feet apart right there.
Jeez.
So I grabbed the set and I went to work, and I had a couple guys working for me, and we were working, and it got about lunchtime, and I said, you guys are going to have to work without me. I'm going down there to check that out. I found another 10-point set and another 4-point side that were within a couple hundred yards of that.
Goodness.
Just a pocket of them.
They came in. That year was an apple year, and there was no acorns, there was no beech nuts.
They were all in there.
And they were coming down off this mountain, feeding in these apple trees beside the road, and there was 5 antlers, like, right there within a couple hundred yards.
Really?
Yeah. That was rare, though. That's only happened... I think I found a road shed one other time other than that.
That's cool. Yeah, I always look. I look hard.
Yeah.
Definitely go and like buy like a patch of oaks so I can see where they're feeding in the winter. I'm like, scanning. I'm gonna get in an accident one of these days. Looking for sheds.
Yeah, rubbernecking.
Yeah, yep.
So you're a logger by profession, right?
Yeah.
Yep. So you're in the woods just about every single day.
Yeah, it's an advantage.
Yep.
You know?
It is.
Yeah.
I've been in the woods 32 years now, and no paid vacations, no paid holidays. But if you work hard and you can kind of work around your schedule with deer season, shed season. See, that's the other thing with sheds is when I shut down in the spring, the roads are posted.
Yep.
I sugar a little bit and I sell some firewood, but when I'm not doing that, I'm out looking for sheds. So it's time well spent. It's a lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I tell people it's like I chose this. This is what I like to do. My wife knows it. She's supportive, and God love her. She's let me do this for. We've been together for almost 29 years, so it's a lifestyle, and you got to be committed to. Like, if you want to be successful at it, you got to put the time in, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just lucky enough I can put the time in.
Yep.
And that's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
It's pretty hard for the guy that only gets a few days, or the guy that's get 1 week off. That's a lot of pressure on yourself.
It is.
It's hard to do.
Mm-hmm. It is.
And that was me when I was younger.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
But now I take a little bit more in the week.
Yeah. You structure your work around.
You should.
I do.
I do.
That's cool.
Do any of your kids hunt at all with you?
No, the boys went a little bit when they were younger, but it just wasn't their cup of tea. They used to go shed hunting with me some. And actually, my wife went shed hunting with me a few times, and she wasn't a fan. And I took her in January, and it was like 0 out.
Yep.
Snow up to your knees and stuff?
It was cold.
Yeah. Brutal.
And then she's like, I don't want to go when it's like that. And then one time it was my birthday in April. She said, what do you want for your birthday? And I said, I want you to go shed hunting with me. She rolls her eyes and goes, I guess so. So we went up to this spot that I go sometimes, and we went down in there, and it's some old pasture and apple trees and stuff. And I said, we're going to split up and we're going to grid up through these apple trees. We weren't gone 2 minutes, and she goes, I got one. And I'm like, no way, she doesn't have one. And she said, yes, I do. I have one right here. So I walked over, and she picked up this 4-point antler. And I'm like, there's the other side. And I reached down, grabbed it. Oh, she was mad that I picked up the other side. So that set's over there on the heater, and it's labeled Lisa's first set. So
That's awesome.
That's Lisa's set. But that was the last time she went.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh. That's awesome stuff.
Yeah.
Do you see anything when you're in the winter and you're logging and stuff? Do you see anything crazy the deer doing from the cuts and stuff that you're in? They come down and feed it all while you're working and stuff?
Yeah, I've seen that. We've had deer that come in and feed on the tops all winter. We've had moose.
Yeah.
Years ago, we used to see a lot of moose when we cut up on the national forest and stuff.
Yeah.
You know, I'm going back in the 90s, early 2000s. At one time, we had 12 moose in one clear cut at once
Really?
that was
Just-
feeding on our tops.
Wow.
But those days are gone in that area.
Have you definitely seen a sharp decline in the
Oh, yeah.
around here and stuff?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
too
a
bad.
lot.
That is too bad.
Those ticks are killing them pretty bad.
Yeah, the ticks and the brainworm, and actually a lot of their habitat in those areas. They did so much cutting for quite a while; it was really good. Now that stuff's gone by; it's too big, and they need the fresh browse. So
it's gonna be a decline unless they cut a bunch more, is what you're saying.
yeah, I guess the ticks and the brainworm's probably a bigger problem,
Right.
Because they're doing enough cutting on the private stuff that
True.
they go to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, big decline from what it was back 20 years ago.
Do you find that the moose nowadays around here are living way up high? Because it seems like in Vermont, anytime you hit a green growth top way up high, 3,000 feet, 2,800, that seems like where a lot of the moose are hanging for us in Vermont.
Yeah, I guess it depends on the time of year too.
Yeah.
Right. But you know, you see them around occasionally
You do.
and stuff. But I think you'll tend to catch them up there in the summer more too.
Yeah.
Probably cooler. Let's face it. You know, they're built for the cold, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
They like those shady, dark spots and the water, and so I guess it depends on the year, but definitely a big decline around here.
Yeah, it's too bad. Used to be moose all over Vermont, New Hampshire. I mean, Maine still got a really good population of them, but
Yeah.
it sounds like they have even a slight decline up there.
Yeah, I got some friends that shed hunt, and a lot of them finding a lot of calves. The calf mortality with the tick thing is crazy.
Yeah.
You know, it's too bad. I hope it comes back. I've got my doubts, but let's hope.
Yeah. Anything else what do you want to add?
No, I think it was great.
Yeah, it was a good podcast. Appreciate you sitting down with us. It's been fun.
Yeah.
We learned a lot about shed hunting. I was looking forward to this because I know I want to get better at shed hunting and expand what I know on that stuff. So
You know, I've been pretty tight-lipped for a long time, but I'm like at the point, it's like, does it really matter?
Mm-hmm.
It got crazy. I mean, back in the day, there was only a handful of us doing it.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as competition.
cool. All right, well, we'll definitely have to loop back with you and do another episode maybe this time next year or after deer season or stuff because it's just super interesting stuff. People love listening in on this stuff, and it's fun. All right, well,
cool.
we'll wrap this up. Thanks for doing this with us, John, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Yeah, it was good.